Ladies and gentlemen, Tesla closed up today 0.70%. And honestly, I think you're at what could be a breakout moment for Tesla. And I will explain why, technically speaking, from a technical perspective, things look good here to me. But tomorrow's economic data and speech from Fed Jerome Powell is really going to be what dictates this market. I mean, tomorrow, as I've covered on this channel twice now, you get retail sales. People are concerned about the economy. They're concerned about the consumer. Well, retail sales is going to solidify. Like, do we have deeper issues? Or did we maybe get too fearful too fast? As we heard today from bank CEOs, that the consumer is actually holding in there. And I think that's part of why today was not as bad of a day as it otherwise could have been. Because let's face it, we had bad tariff headlines. There was not good news today. But yet the S&P was in the green for most of the day, albeit closing down about 0.25%. That is a boring day these days. I mean, not a bad day for bad tariff news. We'll say that. And that is actually a deeper sign that the markets may be getting ready to bottom here soon, that maybe a recovery could start to play out. If stocks do well or not nearly as bad as they have been on bad news, typically that means the bad news is already priced in. And we talked about this on the channel over this weekend. But simply put, I think the fear has hit a max level. Okay. Can there be more fear? Can there be, moments of fear and moments of, optimism throughout this whole tariff negotiations process? Yes. But I think the big fear is at this point past us. I mean, dude, we got Vietnam and Malaysia and Cambodia and China and India and all these crazy high tariffs. Like, what are the odds that we revert back to that now that we're in this negotiations phase? Probably not very high. And I think to get back to a peak fear, you have to believe those tariffs are actually going to go into effect. Because if they go into effect, we're going to have a deep recession. But the probability of that following this pause and now negotiations is a lot lower than it was before. So emotions tend to drive markets in the near term. And when you hit that level of extreme fear, and now you're not sitting at those extreme levels of fear anymore, that I think should be a stabilizer for a bottoming process. And I think that is the process that we are going through now. Now, as I said in the last video, you're really not going to know if stocks are actually at a bottom until after the fact. That's why it's scary when you're buying dips. You never know how low the markets are going to go, especially if you're in leverage. But it ultimately comes down to the consumer and the economy. The consumer makes up over 70% of the economy. That's why I specifically reference the consumer. And that's why tomorrow morning's data is so important. Elon Musk also dropped what seems like some pretty big news. Tesla's official X account says one day it'll drive itself right to your house. Elon Musk shares this and said, this year, imagine that if your car just drove itself to your house for you to take delivery of your Tesla. How incredible would that be? And how good would that be for margins? Like, that would be incredible. Now, Donald Trump also said this afternoon that he may want countries to choose between the US or China. And again, that really puts China in a bad position because China is a big exporter, not a huge importer of anything really that Europe is selling or the US is selling from that perspective. So it's like, Trump's kind of cornering China right now. Trump also said that they are working with Panama now about the canal. Trump said the tariff pause was because it's a transition and came from the need for flexibility. Trump says that he is getting along well with Mexico's President Sheinbaum, that we want to help Sheinbaum and Mexico on cartels. Trump also says that he will make it easier for farmers and hotels. United Airlines gave some pretty crazy full year 2025 guidance as well today that is worth mentioning. They say adjusted EPS of $11.50 to $13.50 in stable environment, $7 to $9 if recession hits. They see Q2 EPS $3.25 to $4.25. Model 5 price target rev hit in downturn with full year capex under $6.5 billion. And also in the news today around 4 p.m., Mexico was halting fuel imports at the Texas border as inspections are ramping up, presumably for illegal substances. Joe Rogan on X shared this video from Mario Nafal, how it was a clip from FSD driving. Joe Rogan says, I had my Tesla Model S drive me home the other day with FSD, and it's effing wild. Changes lanes to avoid slow traffic, stops at red lights and stop signs, hits the blinkers and turns for you. It's bananas. We also are seeing a new Model Y with this camo wrap in India testing something. So getting down to what's going to be important tomorrow. In the morning, 8:30 in the morning, retail sales month over month will be coming out. If you are bullish on this market, you want as high of a number as possible. The expectation is around 1.2%, give or take. Forecast here of 1.1%, consensus at 1.3%. Anything higher than that's going to be really good news. It's going to show the consumer is continuing to spend, that, although there's some nervousness out there, it's really not affecting things. Yet, at least. Now, that's important from a consumer perspective, but it's also important from a GDP perspective, okay? Retail sales tomorrow, you can see the next GDP Now update is Wednesday, April 16th, is going to, what I believe, solidify whether or not we're going to have a negative Q1. Now, there's obviously going to be other things coming out, and if the number is maybe not as good as expected, but not super weak, then maybe some other numbers are going to, later next couple of weeks could influence the Q1 GDP print before it comes out. But for better or for worse, if we get a strong GDP report tomorrow, it's very likely that we're not already in a recession. If we get a very weak GDP report tomorrow, it's almost a guarantee that we're, or a weak retail sales report tomorrow, it's almost a guarantee that we're in a recession. So I do think markets are going to move a lot based on that retail sales report coming out tomorrow. Again, because of the recession probabilities that would, need to rise on a low number, and recession odds that would likely fall on a good number. Now, we will get industrial production month over month, capacity utilization, industrial production year over year, manufacturing production month over month and year over year as well. Smaller sub data sets, but it's really about the headline retail sales number that's going to move our markets. You also get the NAHB housing market index and business inventories that come out at 10 o'clock in the morning. You also get the Bank of Canada interest rate decision and the monetary policy report. But later in the day at 1:30 p.m., you get a speech from Fed Jerome Powell. Now, if Powell gives us the same old, which I think is the base case expectation, it's not going to be that big of a deal because we already know what Powell's been saying. If Powell changes anything, if Powell becomes more concerned about the economy, or if Powell is more concerned about inflation, any pivot there is really what's going to move markets. And yeah, we're going to listen to every single word that Powell speaks, and that's what is going to ultimately move the markets, right? Now, you get a speech from Fed Schmidt as well, but retail sales and Jerome Powell's speech likely is the catalyst for the rest of this week. Now, you do have some earnings as well coming out tomorrow. You have ASML in the morning. Now, that is basically the tier 1 to like TSMC. Like ASML provides a lot of the machines that TSMC actually uses to make chips. Now, ASML has had their own set of issues, even as the chip, gold rush has been going on for the last 2 years now. ASML earnings, if they're good, that's great. it's going to be a good thing for markets tomorrow morning. If they're bad, it's not super bad though, because again, TSMC, they likely already have what they need to make a lot of chips, right? They don't need ASML's new machines, to put it that way, to necessarily continue to make chips for NVIDIA and others. So ASML, if it's good tomorrow, that's good. If it's bad, well, it's not good, but it's also not bad, if that makes any sense. You have Abbott, Progressive in the morning as well tomorrow. Tomorrow and after hours, you have Alcoa, Bank of Ozark, CSX. And then Thursday, you have TSMC. That is the big one. Again, if TSMC has good earnings, that means AI is still alive and well, essentially. And it's really important that TSMC has good earnings. If they have bad earnings, then you're going to get a lot more concerns about the AI sector more broadly. Now, Netflix also reports earnings Thursday and after hours. They tend to move, Netflix tends to move, Mag 7, but I don't know how much of an impact that's going to have this time around, because it's all about tariffs and what margins are ultimately going to look like. And from my understanding, Netflix shouldn't be too impacted from that. So that's really the rest of this week in a nutshell. Now, Tesla is fascinating because it's trading in a very tight range between 260 on the high side and what I would call 240 on the low side. $20 range for Tesla is tiny. Like, Tesla can move $50 a week, $100 a week pretty regularly, right? So you're kind of coiling here for what I believe could be a big move. Now, you want to get above that 20-day moving average, around $257. But if retail sales are good tomorrow, if Jerome Powell is not super bearish, if he's not super concerned about really anything, if he's kind of the same old Powell, that likely is an upside catalyst for markets at this point. Hopefully, recession odds would come down. You would think they would with a good retail sales report, and that would positively impact Tesla. Now, keep in mind, I think people are a little nervous making big investment decisions before this earnings season. Okay, earnings season in its entirety is really a catalyst, right? At least this time around more than even other times, because what do companies say about the consumer? What do they say about recession? What are their plans going ahead? Okay, and how to navigate this volatility. Same is true with Tesla. Now, next week when Tesla reports earnings, we are going to get hopefully a lot of good information, a lot of good news. Okay, we're expecting some kind of more definitive start date for the cheaper, lower priced Teslas, some kind of event to be scheduled, some kind of clarity on that, because Tesla indicated 2 quarters in a row now that production would start in the first half of this year. Well, there's 2 months left in the first half of this year, so that needs to get up and moving. And then the robotaxi launch in Austin. What does Tesla say about that? What is their timeline for that? How many cities do they expect to introduce that service in? Have they already started talking to cities, other cities besides Austin and California, to actually launching robotaxi services? Kind of use Austin as a guinea pig. If things go well there, then other cities come along shortly thereafter. That could be an upside catalyst as well. And I think at this point, you've also hit peak fear for Tesla, right? With Tesla down still even close to 50% from all-time highs, 40+%, it's one of the most beaten down stocks throughout this sell-off. And whether it's Elon's political affiliations, deliveries slowing down, Elon not working at Tesla anymore, I think the fear has hit a peak fear moment for Tesla. And normally when that happens, Tesla can start to move higher. So I think it's more likely that we get an upside move from here versus a downside move in any kind of large way. But you need to be prepared for either or. You need to be open to Tesla falling $100 from here over the next 3 months and going up $100 from here over the next 3 months. If you're comfortable with both of those outcomes, then you are good, my friend. So let me know your thoughts on this down below in the comment section. Have a fantastic rest of your day, and I will see you in the next one.